Great. So we're here. Great. So we're today the for Web3 creators who economy. I'm a moderator, Taka. Hi. Good morning, guys. So we're having a special guest and a professional guest here during this topic. So guys, maybe one of the quick intro.
Yeah, do you want to start over there?
Yeah, I'll start. Hi, konnichiwa. I'm Jongwon, but I also go by Jada. I'm a developer at Story Protocol. Been there for almost 10 months now. We are building the world's IP blockchain, and there's some exciting announcements coming in this week, so keep your eyes on that. But yeah, building on Story Protocol, and I'm always looking at IPs and how to make content creators better engage with AI. Yeah, so excited to be here.
I'll go next. Konnichiwa, thank you for having us, Taka. My name is Louie, I'm head of experience at Lukso. Lukso is a layer 1 social blockchain focused on the creative economy, its culture, social, and creators. The goal and purpose of Lukso is really to try to give creators a real independent smart account where they don't have to rely on any third parties or any centralized applications to control their identity or reputation, or even wallet for that matter. I've been at Lukso for about 2 years and spent about 5 years professionally in this space, really focused on consumer apps and people.
Hi, I'm Anjali. Thank you, konnichiwa. My name is Anjali. I'm the co-founder and chief community officer with Collabland. We just celebrated our 4th year doing Collabland in May of 2024, and we are a token-gated crypto community management system, both on Telegram and on Discord. So if you've ever joined a community based on a token app that you have, either an NFT or a fungible token, if you've ever used that as a membership or access into a community on Telegram or Discord, you probably used Collabland. Our focus has definitely been thinking about ways that our communities can remain sustainable, and we have a lot of ideas about that we'll be talking about today.
Amazing, great. By the way, I'm from Phaver, which is a Web3 block. We have like 360,000 actually user overall. Maybe we have like a good ways to do us, Great. So since we only have like 80 something minutes, maybe we can just a little bit of things. But first, I want to know from your guys' experiences, what do you see the transformative aspect of Web3 for a creator economy?
Yeah, do you want me to start with that? Great. I think what's really unique about Web3 and our opportunity to engage creators is that we can have a sustainable future for creators. Rather than situations where you're at YouTube or Instagram or any kind of centralized system where you really don't own your users. And with crypto, you can. You have your token, you have your community, you can move them anywhere you want. You're not beholden to the platform that you're on. And so being able to have that type of direct relationship, I think, is key. Moving forward, there's a lot of different things that creators can do, but royalties, I think, have been a big loss for communities and for creators, as we saw in the last a few years, that first it was Blur and then it was OpenSea, how they've dropped creator royalties. However, there are a lot of really interesting things happening in technology right now, which I'm going to give everyone else a chance to talk to, but there's a lot of interesting things that we're going to be able to take back some royalties.
Yeah, I'm very happy to go next. I think the really interesting part about where I'm positioned is, although I work for a layer 1 that really focuses on tools and infrastructure and providing the right pieces of software to enable apps to be built in the right way for creators, we really think less about the projects and the apps, but also about the users. We kind of think like what ecosystem or standards need to be built in order to allow users to have the right applications and for builders to have the right tools to build those applications. And I think although the creators in this space are seeing way more benefits than what they've ever seen, or any of us have ever seen in terms of ownership and decentralization, there's a few really big pain points. Although it's been amazing that every single creator that I've really onboarded into the Web3 space has had to jump through intricate hurdles, and although there's definitely upside, jumping through those hurdles takes a lot of time. And that's why we maybe hit this limit within a few of the creative economy spaces within Web3, because like it just gets to a point where it's like, okay, you know, it's kind of now becoming more of a niche circle of people making it happen in the way that it should be happening for everybody by default. So yeah, I mean, in terms of like really incentivizing creators, it's all about having, in my opinion, an ecosystem where they don't need to, you know, think, okay, but where's this space going to be in the next 5 years? I believe we personally need a way to interact on-chain in such a seamless way through smart accounts and account structure, where you don't need to think what's going to be happening in a couple of years, and you know that these tools are here to stay and build in the right way.
I'll say, sort of going back to the idea of ownership. In Web2, when you create content, you're actually tied to a platform. So if I tweet, sometimes Twitter asks me to verify myself, and sometimes they block me, or accounts get suspended. I think on YouTube, if you upload some content, they might take it down. So I think in Web2, this idea of ownership is really tied to platforms, but in Web3, you own your content. So that allows you to really do more actions on your content without being afraid of being taken down. So for example, if you want to build an app on your data right now, it's really possible to even export your data from Twitter. But on Web3, you own your data, so you can build your apps on top, you can use other apps. Also, you can have like an interoperable actions with your data. So I think that's one of the beauty, and that allows you to openly distribute your content because you know that your content is probably owned by you. So I think that's the beauty of fundamental value of why we should push for Web3 content creator property.
Can I ask a question? Like when you say you own your data, as a creator, it's really important that we know who you is. But right now, like with BOAs and like DNSs, it's very hard to know who you is. Like how would you, because I'm very interested like with Storyboard School, like how would you envision the you becoming as a creator an actual person on chain that has a reputation and that really isn't just like a random public key, tied to an ES?
Yeah, so I think one way to start tackling this issue of who you is, because right now on blockchain it's really hard to, there's a lot of ideas like anonymous profiles. I think the process Story's taking right now is first sort of connecting your social identities to the Web3 identity through account abstractions. As you said, it allows you to sort of prove that you are someone in the Web2 world, and it allows you to bridge that identity to Web3. So that if you want to keep it, then you can maintain that bridge, and by linking multiple social media, you can sort of prove it, so that even if one of your social media gets taken down, you can still prove another avenues.
Yeah, I was thinking about what you said about how creators need simpler onboarding right now. And it's been really interesting because I compare it kind of back to like Web1, right? Where it was completely unknown and people needed to be educated and people needed to hear about it. And in that way, we're kind of in a similar situation. Although I will say with the American elections, the fact that crypto is coming up at all in those conversations is a huge win for us. So that being said, we're kind of in for the people in the room that were around the first time, in like the AOL stage. Like it's not full www, it's not, I don't even know what they call the world of it anymore, but it's not like what we consider the internet. It was still like an AOL platform where you had to get a disk in the mail and you had to put it into your computer. But that was like really the beginning of the candle up in terms of like usage. And so I agree that it's not easy yet, but all the signs, at least from what I saw in history and what went on the first time, my first job out of college was at an internet startup doing search, 7 years before Google was doing search. This feels like that time. And so it may not be here yet, but we're beginning to get these like rudimentary tools now where it's beginning to bring in more people. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, right. Web3, like, the world is still like a niche, like very minority in the world, right? it was same like when they Web 2 came around in 2000, right? Like no one understood what is going on, right? But now we're using it without understanding fully. But having said that, I think you guys are already facing the struggles of more existing creators or these people, influencer people. And what do you guys think? I don't know, which people can do to attract them as well for
This is the hardest part about panels for me, but please.
Could you repeat the question one more time?
how can you attract those creators, Web2 people onto Web3?
Yeah. I think the same way that you said that history repeats itself, up until we have a way of interacting on chain where you don't even realize that you're on chain. Up until then, I think we're going to struggle. And in my opinion, the fastest way that we can get there, and not like we should be rushing here, this is a marathon, not a sprint, is through transaction relay services. So, for example, Lukso, if you were to go and create a universal profile, which is our independent smart accounts built within the Lukso ecosystem, you don't need to go and find your wallet with Ethereum or any other native token. Instead, you can just use a transaction relay service, which is built directly at the moment from Lukso. But over time, it would be a business where, like you have a mobile with a data plan like EE or O2, you pay, maybe $20 a month for 10 gigabytes, but who knows what 10 gigabytes really is, right? So in the future, it would be the case if you pay $20 for 10 million, 10 million gas. And although you might not know what 10 million gas is right now, over time, you'll just start to get a rough gist of how that looks. And I think that's the fastest way that we can onboard, more creators in more of a seamless way, because the biggest friction point in the picture is gas. However, there's also a lot more that needs to happen than just transaction relay services, and they can't happen until smart accounts are the only accounts that we really interact with as an industry. But then, of course, there's also other issues of like, okay, but then where do I go to build? So we really need to focus on abstraction, not just from the account level, but also the chains. And I think what we're seeing right now with like 4337 is that a lot of people are focusing on the transaction side, and these standards are very complex, although they're meant to be simple, but ultimately what needs to happen is we really need to focus on the accounts. And up until we can move from EOS to smart accounts, from the foundation upwards, so everything is social by default, like what Lukso has been building for the last 5 years, I genuinely believe that we're going to be struggling to onboard creators.
Cool, thanks. You.
I would say, so there's two angles to this. The first one is lowering the barrier to entry. So as Louie said, account abstraction is probably the best way to lower the entry or barrier to entry, so that if you are interested going to the Web3 world of social content creation, then you can seamlessly onboard to Web3 platforms and use the apps on it. I think the other part that Storybook is also focusing on is how we can make it sustainable and how we can sort of push the Web3 or Web2 content creators to start using Web3. I think the best answer to that right now is that there has to be some sustainable sort of source of loyalty, especially on-chain loyalty that can incentivize people to really step over that barrier and start using Web3. Because, unfortunately right now, using Web3 is a huge, I would say, energy compared to Web2. So it's like, you need an incentive to use Web3 platforms. So Storybook right now is really focusing on how we can automate the royalty system on blockchain and create a seamless platform for users to sort of construct the royalty language. So for example, if you're creating some IPs, you can say I want 10% royalty from using my IPs. And that really allows content creators to define this framework and let others use it and sort of automate the whole process. So that if there's royalty coming in, you don't have to worry about it. So we're sort of abstracting away the royalty layer as well and pushing people to really start using Web3 platforms.
Yeah, so two things. Number one is how do we lower the barrier to entry? And I would say, well, the Collabland approach, which I think has been a good one, which is to meet the users where they are. And so we launched originally on on Telegram, and then found our largest growth on Discord, and that's because communities are already forming there. Adding an additional crypto layer is less of a burden than moving to a Web3 specific platform. I absolutely believe in Web3 specific platforms, we need them. However, we need to recognize that's going to be meeting people along their journey. That's not going to be meeting them at the beginning of the journey. And then speaking about people that are further along in their journeys, our thesis, Collabland's thesis on bringing back royalties is the idea of a community chain or layer threes for creators. Whether you're a conglomerate, whether you're a brand, or whether you're a DAO, being able to have your own layer three and having transaction fees go to you for anything that's built with your IP or with your tokens, or people that are launching tokens and launch on your chain, and then you get the transaction fees there. Being able to have a sustainable future is extremely important. So we imagine a future where we're going to see more layer threes similar to DJ chain. So that's kind of where we're at. But again, that's further down the road, but that's where we see it going.
Interesting. It's a really hard topic, right? And everyone is starting along. How to equal this with two people, the three technology is so difficult. And I've seen Jada, you also got working in the AI field as well, right? And is it the same? Like a difficulties with bringing those people who doesn't really understand AI technology into the AI native world?
I think part of AI is that it really helps you create this content right now. So most people probably use ChatGPT in some ways, and I think one of the barriers that AI prompting is pretty hard. Studying AI is a new concept for most people, but I think the output that's created by AI is really big and substantial enough for people to start using AI world. And I think crypto needs to have more of that. So yeah, right now AI has a lot of incentive for people to use them. So some apps require you to pay, but still the output is greater than how much you pay. So yeah.
So there are a lot of creators is very vague, right? Like there are like artists or painters, and there are also like videographers, also, right? And then do you guys think any difference or any specific creator if they're suitable for your guys' service?
Oh, well, we have communities of all sizes and different types, shapes, everything from NFT communities to individual artist communities to gaming to DAOs to, so anybody that wants to create a community around a shared asset is a good fit for Collabland. So specifically for Collabland, not really. It's pretty open to anybody that wants to create a community. And within Web3, community is what's important. And so we're early enough that we still need a group of strong backers behind us. So most people have one of these communities.
Yeah, I mean, for me to answer this is like kind of tough because I really do believe that every human should have ownership, and I therefore think that every human should, somehow interact on chain. But the way that Lukso thinks about creators is kind of in like two ways. So like, there's people that are already creating in the Web2 world, and then of course people that are already, in the Web3 world. And then the ones that are being bridged are like over the topics that we spoke about regarding royalties, and the ones that are currently here, maybe here because they saw an incentive, or maybe here because of the royalties. But like ultimately, to Lukso, what's really important is that, we need to think about the users, but like we can't just think about users from at least where we stand, and even where I stand personally. Like we really need to think about these tools, and we really need to think like what tools need to be out there for users to actually stay because of what's being built, and not just come because we've raised loads of money or pushing a really hard marketing, campaign, or just because we're working with like these really cool brands. Like we're here to stay, and like as I said, right, we've been around for a minute, and the reason why like maybe not everyone here has been learning about Lukso is because we've really been trying to build in a bit more of a quiet space, because this space is very noisy, and when you work with standards, you need to it's impossible to have an end goal. Right, it's impossible to say, okay, we want to enable builders to have X, Y, and Z, or users. You really need to go one by one. And doing that in the Ethereum space can sometimes result in adoption a little bit too early. And I think that's exactly what we saw with ERC20. Like our founder authored ERC20 in 2014, and like ERC20 wasn't meant to become what it is today. So I think what's important there is that we have some time to really think this through and think about the longevity of this space and what creators aren't going to need just now, but also in 10 years.
I would say, as the world's IP blockchain, we want all IP creators to use Story Protocol and Story Network in some various ways, through either using the blockchain directly or through apps on top. But I think, I would say my personal goal with Story Network and Story Blockchain is to have sort of marginalized groups use blockchain and Web3 tools to really learn about these royalty systems and start distributing their content through blockchain to the world. I used to live in Indonesia for 5 years, and I think a lot of the content creators and artists there are, they're amazing, but they're pretty much pushed away from these global tools just because, first, it's hard for them to understand how it works, and second, there's really not much ways for them to utilize them, and most times we'll just rip their content off and use it, freely. So I think I want to see these people from, these countries to utilize Web3 social economy and content creation tools to really reach the global marketing and reach the global audience.
Right. And let's look at creator economy, which is a creator always have fans, right? And that society, right? And is it gonna fans in Web3 and in Web2 are different or the same or any
I mean, I think before we start to think about who is a fan of the creator, we need to think about the fans looking at the creator. Right now, we have like these solutions in this space where you can have an ENS which can expire, OpenSea can blow up, MetaMask can go down, up until we have a real decentralized, unified platform where you can actually have an identity. I think it's really hard for fans to even really enjoy the creator space in Web3. Like we need to have fully independent smart contract accounts. And I think up until we can have that on a fully standardized level, it's hard to even want to, really support creators in this space because you don't really know who you're supporting. If someone's account is bound to an NFT or really bound to an ENS, it's very difficult. I personally come from a creative family. My mom works in fashion for 30 years. My sister works in fashion as we speak. And I really care about creatives, and that's why I dedicated my life to it in the Web3 space. But I don't even know who I'm interacting with. And although I don't need to know, your national security number, I do want to know your reputation on chain, and I don't want to just see that through ENS.
So I thought of that question a little bit differently, which is like fans in Web2 are more of an audience. However, we did start seeing, I have a 19-year-old daughter, and she's a big BTS fan. And that community, like BTS Army, is probably the closest to what I see to like the kind of excitement and enthusiasm we tend to have in terms of energy in our space. And what we are in our space are collectors, right? And because of that, because we're collectors, what does that actually mean? And that's been a really interesting journey for a lot of creators because they are not necessarily used to the one-on-one relationships that we have within our space, right? Like once you own something, if I buy somebody's NFT, I all of a sudden, not me personally, but many people, feel like, wait, maybe I'm not buying it for the art, maybe I'm buying it for the investment. Because underneath right now, in the way crypto is used, there is a strong financial element. And we cannot ignore the fact that people are purchasing art or joining communities, not just because they're a fan, but because they're looking for some financial incentive and financial upside. So I think that brings a very special and unique pressure to creators within our space, and I don't think it can be overlooked.
I would say the current status quo of Web3 is very financially driven. So there's a lot of meme coins, a lot of DGen stuff happening. Not so much on the emotional connections that exist in Web2 fans. I'm a huge fan of BTS too, from Korea, so I use it all the time. I think a lot of in Web2, so there's this idea of read write own, which Chris Dixon also wrote a book about. In Web2, it's mostly read for the events. In Web3, there's this idea of ownership, so there's own, but I think the missing part is right. So in Web2, currently the audience usually consumes content and does nothing about the actual content. Maybe they might be remixing on TikTok, but I think it's still pretty rare action. And so I think our main job is to really reduce that barrier to write, so that people can read and remix the content they are consuming. And then we already have a piece of ownership that we're trying to reduce the barrier to. So I think when you combine those three, they can really become Web3 fans. Right now, I think their status quo that they're very much separate groups of fans.
To quickly add on to what you just said, because yeah, you're so right. It's, every time you take your phone out of your pocket, it's usually to interact with a human, or at least to interact with a social application. And like I watched a TED talk recently, and I know that we're out of time here, but once you break down how much you use your phone, like I'm not going to go through all the stats here, but it's about 83% of your spare time. And then you think like, well, what am I doing during this 83% of my spare time? And the answer is like you are interacting with like a massive, conglomerate in the Web2 space who are like taking your data and monetizing it. So I don't know why they got paid to use Web3 or to use Web2 either. And if you value yourself at like $10 an hour, you're looking at 30 grand a month spent using social applications.
I saw a bunch of questions, but since time's up, and then I thank you for being super flexible. Actually, I there were a lot of other questions which I didn't share with. So thank you for being flexible, and I really enjoyed it, and I hope you guys enjoyed it.